Solvency II, which relates to insurance businesses and the insurance sector in particular, is there's been a lot of lobbying around making various changes there that would make it easier for insurance businesses to do business and to do more business. But the government is actually consulting a second phase of consultation on exactly trying to answer that question. What are the areas where we could actually make changes to regulation that would both make sure that the city and our financial services are seen as being secure and prudentially well run, but at the same time sufficiently nimble and flexible to accommodate business, which is what we really need to do as we move forward.
Now, look, while we've got you, there's obviously a big debate going on in the city at the moment about the number of private equity takeovers of listed companies. The Morrison's situation has thrown that into relief. I mean, for years we've been talking about levelling the playing field between debt and equity. Do you ever see it happening?
Well, I think there's obviously important scope for both in the market, and I have no doubt the government and the Treasury will be looking very closely at not just Morrison's but various other deals that are happening, particularly on the back of perhaps UK businesses with UK listings that are looking, shall I say, particularly good value at the moment, and no doubt that'll be looking at. But quite what the answer is, and if there is something to be done, I'm afraid is not something I can comment on.
Mel Starr, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, what does the global tech giant Facebook have to do with small shops in the UK? Well, at first glance, not much, but the California-based giant says its Facebook and Instagram platforms have enabled businesses to reach customers during the pandemic, and it's launching a new scheme to help small business owners develop digital skills. It's also rolling out window displays in shops across the country to attract new customers. But is it just window dressing for a tech giant's reputation that's been battered by scandal in recent years? Well, let's ask the company's top executive in the UK and Northern Europe. That's the Facebook Vice President, Steve Hatch. Steve, very good morning to you. You've announced this campaign slogan this morning, it's good to be discovered. I mean, you've had this going for a couple of months in the US, but the emphasis this side of the Atlantic feels slightly different.
Yeah, good morning, Ian. And this morning, you mentioned there are 13 shops now up and down the UK that have been treated to a kind of show-stopping display in their window, something that you might more commonly see in a Harrods or a Selfridges. And that's just one small element of this campaign. I think we're all well aware that the global pandemic, as well as being a health crisis, has also been an economic one. It's hit all businesses, but small businesses in particular. So in addition to the shop windows, we're also announcing training for 300,000 small businesses across the year. And it's been quite incredible seeing them make that pivot to online, but also making sure that as we return to a higher degree of kind of normal life, that they're able to prosper on the high street as well.
I mean, in the US, this campaign was very much framed around starting a discussion on the benefits of personalised advertising. You're not really doing that so much here. Is that because people are already sold on that in this country?
Well, certainly our theme around this is that good ideas deserve to be discovered. And most often the biggest challenge that small businesses face is literally that, being discovered, being found. Now, whether that's in the high street or whether that's online. And a lot of them are really thinking, well, what's next after these past 16 months? Now, there's some good news and some bad news, or challenging news in this, I should say. The good news is that 80% of us are passionate about local businesses, and many of us have found more local businesses over the past 16 months. But also, 54% of us are saying we're probably less likely to be going to those businesses in the future as perhaps normal life resumes. So this campaign is really about throwing a spotlight on those businesses. And there are over 200 million around the world businesses using Facebook tools predominantly for free, and 10 million using personalized advertising. And those adverts work really well for the businesses because it enables them to just reach the people that are most important to them, but also well for people. We want to have ads that are useful and relevant in our lives in the same way that we expect a degree of personalization now.
Now, when you've launched the shop bookmark in the app, it would seem very much as being an attempt to sort of take on the likes of Amazon and eBay. What sort of progress are you making in your part of the world on that front?
Yeah, well, that shops product, as you mentioned, was launched last summer. And, we all recognize that at a time when the only way that people are able to shop would be online, that it would be critical that all businesses had the option to do that. So we built Facebook Shops. It was a product designed, conceived, engineered, and launched by our engineering teams here in the UK. And now there are 1.2 million small businesses predominantly using Facebook shops around the world, and over 300 million people visiting a Facebook shop on a monthly basis. So it's been really impressive to see these inspiring small businesses who have made this pivot really quickly and are blending both kind of online commerce and the real high street experience.
Now, following the OECD agreement reached last week, it looks like there's going to be a global minimum corporate tax. Do you think this is going to result in Facebook paying more taxes in the UK?
Well, it may well do, actually, and that's something we welcome. We've been calling for a change in this for quite some time, and we do believe that the OECD is the right answer to this, to have a global rules that we can all understand and we can all follow. Now, I mean, Facebook's effective tax rate for the last 20 years has been 20%. And that's higher than most people imagine in totality. But that taxation revenue hasn't been evenly distributed. So we welcome the announcements, and that might well be that we pay more tax in the future in more places. But if that's the rules that are being set, we'll be following them.
Now, it's been reported recently that Nick Clegg, who's your global head of communications and external affairs, has been lobbying in this country to prevent Paul Dacre becoming chairman of Ofcom. Anything you can say on that?
Well, I've seen those reports. There's nothing I could have had to add to the reports. Of course, we have long-term engagements with government now, whether that's on Ofcom or the upcoming online safety bill, all of which we really, really welcome. It's incredibly important to have the right kind of regulation that supports the government's ambition of the UK being not only the best place to do business online, but also the safest place to be online. And certainly when it comes to the business aspect, the announcements we're making today, we think will make a big difference to the small businesses that maybe don't always get the headlines, but represent over half of employment in this country.
Okay. Now, earlier this year, you promised to remove pages from people who were discouraging getting a vaccine for COVID-19 and other diseases. What sort of progress are you making on that?
Yeah, this has been a huge focus for us since the beginning of the pandemic, and whether that's removing false claims, where we've now removed over 10 million pieces of content, or labeling, where things are seen as identified by independent fact checkers as incorrect, and we've labelled and demoted in the Facebook feed over 125 million pieces of content, and then given the option to redirect to the correct information. So this has been a huge focus for us. Of course, we've had to be really agile. As the guidelines from the government in this country and other health authorities around the world have adapted, we've been adapting with them. So we've been lockstep with governments around the world, and most of all, kind of NHS in this country. And it's not just about removing that information, it's also getting people to the right sources. So we've directed over 3 billion people to the WHO information through our COVID centre. And then UK have worked on local campaigns with community leaders to ensure that everyone has the confidence to take the vaccination.
Has the problem been more pronounced in this country than elsewhere in Northern Europe?
No, I wouldn't say that. Although what has been really encouraging is to see that the vaccine hesitancy is actually one of the lowest that we're seeing in the UK, and that's progressed quite strongly over the past few months. So nothing in particular that would suggest any kind of greater causes for concern in the UK, but we've certainly had to be incredibly vigilant and take our lead from government at every step.
All right, Steve Hatch, appreciate you joining me this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Well, still to come here on Ian King Live, we'll be taking a look at how the markets are doing this Tuesday morning. Don't go away.
It's great news, fantastic news for NHS staff that the Queen has chosen to award the George Cross to the National Health Services across the 4 nations. Of course, it recognises all the tremendous work the NHS has done since 1948 in caring for people, in looking after the health of the nation. But I think in particular it recognises the last 16 months, which of course have been the hardest time for those staff looking after hundreds of thousands of people with COVID during the pandemic, and of course keeping services going for people without COVID. It's been a fantastic response, and it's been the fantastic success of that NHS vaccine programme. In England, 66 million people vaccinated already, 38 million first doses, 28 million second doses. That is allowing us, as you heard from Callum a few minutes ago, to begin to open up and get back to normal lives. NHS staff have delivered that programme, the biggest and fastest in our history, at the same time as they've been managing hundreds of thousands of COVID patients. It's really been a fantastic response, and I think the Queen has marked that today in the award of the George Cross. You know, I've been in the health service for 40 years or so. It's incredibly fulfilling. There are very few jobs where you get the chance to make such a difference, to save lives. It's incredibly fulfilling as a career. Whether you're a doctor, a nurse, a paramedic, a porter, a receptionist, an accountant, an IT specialist, there are literally hundreds of different jobs that you can have in the health service. But the really remarkable thing about it is everybody pulls together to make a difference to people's health.
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier. Why? Meeting you.
Welcome back. Let's take a spin through some of the other business stories that are around this morning. And Sainsbury's has reported better than expected sales in its latest quarter. Sales in the 16 weeks to the 26th of June were up by 1.6%. Excluding fuel, on the same period last year on a like-for-like basis. Many analysts had expected a fall, reflecting tough comparisons with last year when, of course, the pandemic and lockdowns boosted demand. Well, the UK's second largest supermarket also announced £50 million worth of price cuts on everyday products, including strawberries, cherries, bacon and potatoes. But it also warned of global supply challenges that are likely to continue for the remainder of the year. And staying with grocery retail, the online grocer Ocado has narrowed half-year pre-tax losses from £40.6 million to £23.6 million. That was as sales rose by just over 21% to £1.3 billion. Well, Ocado said it expects to spend £700 million this year investing in the rollout of customer fulfilment centres, both in the UK and overseas. It opened 3 such centres in the first 6 months of the year, in Bristol and in Monroe, Ohio and Groveland, Florida. And the French industry body for champagne producers has urged its members to halt shipments to Russia. It follows a new law that was signed by President Vladimir Putin last Friday that forces foreign producers to describe their product as sparkling wine. Well, makers of Champanskoye, which is the Russian for champagne, are the only ones allowed to continue using the term. The European Commission has criticised the move and has said it will have a considerable impact on EU wine exports. Well, the oil price has hit a near 3-year high today after OPEC and its allies failed to agree on a reduction in production cuts. Some members, including Saudi Arabia, had been hoping to raise production over coming months, but the United Arab Emirates refused to agree. Well, a barrel of Brent crude at one point this morning hit $77.61, which is the highest since October 2018. At the moment, as you can see on the screen there, it's $77.50 a barrel, up just under 0.5%. On the equity market, stocks in the Asia-Pacific region saw mixed trading overnight, with stocks in Tokyo and Mumbai finishing slightly higher. Hong Kong and Shanghai were more or less unchanged, while Sydney finished off 0.75%. Well, in Europe, stocks opened largely to the upside a couple of hours ago or so, but look at that. Here's the picture. It's all melted away, all of the main indices in negative territory right now. Among talking points, shares of the French train maker Alstom, they're down by 7.5% in Paris this morning. That's after it warned of heavy cash outflows as it integrates the rail business that it recently bought from Bombardier of Canada. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 is also in, well, look at that, it's more or less unchanged, actually. That's not a bad showing given what's going on elsewhere in Europe right now. Falls in property and financial stocks weighing on the index slightly. The two biggest fallers are British Land and Land Securities, both of them in negative territory on a bit of adverse comment from one of the brokers, both off by more than 2%, as you can see there. On the upside, International Airlines, the owner, of course, of British Airways and Aer Lingus, its shares currently 1.5% to the good. That's on hopes, of course, of a fast return to international travel. Outside the FTSE, that factor has also lifted EasyJet. Its shares up nearly 1% right now. But overall, in the mid-cap index, roughly 2 fallers for every gainer right now. Seems to be a bit of profit taking afoot. On the foreign exchange markets, meanwhile, the dollar continues to come off the boil after the US jobs numbers last Friday. Not that that's done the pound. Well, the pound is more or less unchanged there against the dollar. Sterling nearly a fifth of 1% higher right now against the euro. Plenty to discuss then with my guest this morning, which is Janet Moy, she's the investment director at Brewin Dolphin. Janet, very good morning to you. This OPEC situation is really very interesting. I mean, the UAE really seem to be going out on a limb compared with some of the other members of the OPEC Plus grouping.
Yes, hi, good morning, Ian. Thanks for having me. Yes, the UAE actually agrees with increasing the production target, but then because the deal involves longer-term output baseline, so the UAE is not entirely happy with the current baseline. They actually want to increase that baseline because over the years they have increased a lot of their capital investment into the oil infrastructure, and they wish to produce more in the future. But if the current agreement goes through, then they won't be able to. And as a result, they're holding back to the consensus.
And of course, in the meantime, demand is starting to pick up. I mean, it feels as though there could be quite a supply-demand imbalance brewing.
Absolutely. According to estimates, there are currently 2 million per day 2 million barrel per day deficit in the oil market. And primarily that is because demand has been pretty robust. And especially if we go into the summer season when travel restarts, then that the demand for oil will keep increasing. But meanwhile, supply is pretty much controlled by OPEC at the moment. And we won't get an increase in oil supply for August, which according to this agreement would happen. But obviously it is not at the moment. And we still don't have a timeline when that conversation